What's going on YouTube? My name is Zachary Galvan. I'm going to be doing an assignment for my professor, Dr. Gonzalez. It's for my exercise physiology course at the University of Texas at San Antonio, aka UTSA. So the sport that I'm just going to be going briefly over and talking today about is going to be American football. As a former football player in high school, college football, high school, college football, high school football, Friday Night Lights, as a 3-year varsity and now a student athletic trainer at the University of Texas at San Antonio. I've had my fair share of experience with the sport, and I kind of just wanted to talk about it a little bit based on the questions that were appointed for the extra credit. Um, First and foremost, I love football so much. It's probably my bread and butter. I used to really love basketball as a kid growing up. Although in high school, it took a change from whenever I met my athletic trainers, and they just took really good care of me as far as being an athlete and keep taking care of my well-being and taking care of my body so that my body takes care of me mentally. And I've gone through off season and in season, the ups and downs of football, and the stress that it can put on an athlete, wanting to perform and be the best that you can. Um, and now just experiencing it firsthand as a student athletic trainer, you definitely see the different sides of things with rehab and treatments and such. And I've just been blessed with the opportunity to be able to be in this position at the University of Texas at San Antonio. Since I've been in the program, this will be my third semester. I'm currently working with softball. Um, Working with football was just such an amazing experience. I got to travel and just see injuries up close and personal, acute, chronic, and just work with a variety of different athletes in the field. And to say the least, it's been such a great opportunity, and I've enjoyed it so much. Learning in these classes can be kind of tough just to keep up with clinical hours and clinical rotation, but it's the drive and it's just the knowledge that keeps me going. Um, but we can just jump right into this. So the sport that I'm going to be talking about today is going to be American football, or otherwise known in the United States as just football. Um, So the first question I have is, what is the sport and what is the demands of the sport? Football is a highly intensity collision-based sport that demands a combination of strength, power, speed, agility, and mental acuity. Athletes must perform short bursts of maximum effort, typically lasting 4 to 7 seconds per play, followed by brief recovery periods. The sport requires players to have exceptional muscular strength and power for blocking, tackling, and explosive movements like sprinting and jumping. Speed, agility, and quick reaction time are essential for positions like wide receivers, defensive backs, while linemen rely more on strength, leverage, and mass to win in the trenches. Physical battles at the line of scrimmage. Football also requires anaerobic endurance to sustain short, repeated high-intensity efforts, anaerobic capacity to recover between plays, in addition to physical demands, cognitive skills such as decision-making to recover between plays, in addition to resilience, are critical, particularly for quarterbacks. Overall, football is a physically demanding and mentally challenging sport that requires a diverse set of physiological and cognitive abilities depending on the player's position. The next question that Dr. Gonzalez appointed to us was, what does the athlete do in the sport? And football is just such a collision-based sport, coming from a former football player himself. You get bruised up and beat up. It puts a lot of toll on the body physically, as just as much as it does mentally. And you have to make sure that you're keeping up with recovery. That's a big part of what I've learned as a student athletic trainer. It's important to keep up with your body and practices, because it can get mentally and physically draining, and it can really put you in a bad position to where you can get a really bad chronic injury. So what does the athlete do in the sport? In football, athletes engage in a variety of actions that depend on their specific positions, but all players contribute to the overall objective of advancing the ball towards the opponent's end zone to score points. Offensive players execute plays that involve running, passing, catching, and blocking. Quarterbacks lead the offense by throwing passes or handling off the ball to the running backs, while wide receivers and tight ends run routes to catch passes. Running backs carry the ball through defensive formations, relying on agility, speed, and power to break tackles. On the defensive side of the ball, players aim to stop the offense by tackling the ball carriers, defending passes, and forcing turnovers. Defensive linemen and linebackers engage in physical battles at the line of scrimmage to pressure the quarterback and disrupt plays, while defensive backs cover receivers to prevent completions. Special teams players handle kickoffs, punts, field goals, and returns, often requiring speed, precision, and situational awareness. Each play lasts only a few seconds, but intensity, strategy, and teamwork required to make football one of the most physically and mentally demanding sports. Whenever I used to play football, I used to play defensive line. I was a defensive end, and I played outside linebacker. By far, best position on the field. A little bit biased just because I love going and grabbing the quarterback. I love having my name called out whenever I make a play on the defensive side of the ball. I feel like scoring touchdowns was just always for like the bride and pretty. But I mean, hey, I got my fair share of touchdowns back in high school, and it is a pretty great feeling. But nothing is better than having your name called out after TFL. So that was my favorite position on the field, and it just so happened to be the position I played. So going into the second round of questions, given the demands of the sport, what are the physiological requirements of an athlete competing in this sport? So the physiological requirements for football athletes are extensive, as the sport demands a unique combination of strength, power, speed, and agility and endurance. Players rely heavily on anaerobic energy systems, ATP, PC, and glycolytic, to perform short, explosive bursts of activity during each play, which typically lasts 4 to 7 seconds. Muscular strength and power are essential for actions like tackling, blocking, sprinting, and jumping, especially for linemen who engage in constant physical collisions. Speed and agility are critical for skill positions like wide receivers, defensive backs, who must accelerate, decelerate, and change direction quickly. Cardiovascular endurance, while less important than endurance sports, is necessary for recovery between plays and maintaining performance throughout the game. Flexibility and mobility help prevent injuries, particularly in joints like shoulders, hips, and knees. Additionally, body composition varies by position, with alignment requiring larger mass for leverage, while skill players prioritize lean muscle mass for speed and agility. Collectively, these physiological traits enable players to meet the sport's physical and cognitive demands. Jumping into another question for the second round in the paragraphs that we have put out for us to answer is going to be, for instance, if you are using football as your sport, how might these requirements differ from a quarterback and a wide receiver and a lineman? If you choose running as your sport, how might this differ when running distances 100 meter versus 1 mile versus 5K versus marathon? Okay, so whenever we're talking about this stuff, it's talking about the types of muscle fibers that we're using and what type of athlete it's going to be, performing in these types of sports. What I have down for football is going to be physiological requirements of football. They differ significantly between positions due to the unique roles each player fulfills on the field. Quarterbacks require moderate strength and power for throwing, along with agility and mobility to evade defenders. Their primary physiological demand is cognitive, as they might process information quickly, make split-second decisions, and maintain composure under pressure. Wide receivers, on the other hand, prioritize speed, agility, and anaerobic capacity to run precise routes, evade defenders, and catch passes. They have a lean muscular body composition to maximize speed and explosiveness. Linemen, both offensive and defense, have vastly different requirements, as their role involves physical collisions at the line of scrimmage. They require maximum strength, power, and mass to win blocking and tackling battles. While linemen rely less on speed and agility, they still need to have short burst explosiveness to engage with opponents. As a result, position-specific training focuses on developing the specific physiological traits most crucial to each player's role on the team. Jumping into the third round of questions, we only have 4 today. Given the physiological requirements described, what are some limiting factors that would impact an athlete during their competition, and how might these limiting factors be addressed during their training? So this one I took really in depth, because as a student athletic trainer, I like to take these things very seriously. I've always wanted to be in the world of sports medicine and coaching, and this is my element. And I really just love this stuff. So limiting factors in football competition include fatigue, muscular imbalances, inadequate strength or power, limited agility, poor reaction time, and a lack of mental resilience. Fatigue is a major factor at repeated high-intensity efforts and can deplete energy stores, reduce reaction speed, and impair decision-making. So this is addressed through anaerobic conditioning, interval training, and sport-specific drills to enhance recovery between plays. Muscular imbalances or weakness increase the risk of injury and reduce performance. Strength training, corrective exercises, and flexibility work to help prevent stuff like this. Limited power and strength can hinder blocking, tackling, and explosive movements. So athletes engage in resistance training and plyometrics to improve force production. Agility and reaction time are critical for positions like wide receivers and defensive backs, and these are enhanced through agility ladders, cone drills, and cognitive reaction training. Mental resilience and focuses are also essential for peak performance under pressure, and many athletes use visualization, mindfulness, and stress management techniques to maintain mental sharpness throughout the game. By addressing these limiting factors, football players can sustain high performance and reduce the risk of injury at play. As a defensive lineman and an outside linebacker, I would still perform these drills just to help with my reaction time, with my acceleration off the line. I feel like that was the best skill that I had playing football back whenever I was a little bit younger as a kid. I was just always real quick off the line, and I had good reaction time. And that's what I found upon most, because that was my best skill. So it just left improvement for everything else that I had to improve as a football player. So another question would be, if an athlete starts training for this sport for the first time, what physiological adaptations would you expect to see? So this takes me back to like the summer camp days, or like two-a-days back in the Valley. I played at San Benito High School, and whenever I think about this question, I think about just throwing up, not training at all, coming back to the two-a-days where your body is just constantly under a lot of stress, and you're just pushing your body to the limit. So your body's gonna have to adapt, because it takes time and it's consistency. And it also plays a factor of what you're eating. Nutrition is a big factor for athletes, and you have to make sure that you're getting, the essential nutrients and stuff that your body needs. The protein, the carbs to perform. Your healthy fats. But let's go jump into this question. So when an athlete begins training for football for the first time, several key physiological adaptations occur to meet the demands of the sport. Initially, neuromuscular adaptations take place as the nervous system becomes more efficient at recruiting motor units and coordinating muscle contractions. This results in improved strength, power, and agility, even before significant muscle growth occurs. Over time, hypertrophy, which is muscle growth, increases, especially in muscles critical for blocking, tackling, and sprinting, leading to greater force production and power. Stronger player, stronger play. Cardiovascular and metabolic adaptations also develop with enhanced anaerobic capacity and faster recovery time between high-intensity efforts. The body's ATP-PC system becomes more efficient, so allowing for quicker energy replenishment between plays. Adaptations in flexibility and mobility occur as athletes engage in stretching and dynamic movements, reducing the risk of injury. Finally, connective tissue, so our tendons and ligaments, strengthens, which improves joint stability and resilience to the physical demands of football. These adaptations enable new athletes to perform at higher levels of intensity and reduce the risk of injury over time. Sorry, I'm talking a lot. I'm just not used to speaking about it that often, but I do love brainstorming and talking about this with other ATS students and other peers in class, because it's just so interesting to me. Like I've always loved this, and the fact that I'm here, I'm just so blessed in the position that I am now. Let's jump into the last question, and then we'll jump into the conclusion. How does this differ from an individual who has been consistently training and competing in this sport for a long time? For an individual who has been consistently training and competing in football for a long time, the physiological adaptations are more refined, stable, and specific to their position's demands. Unlike beginners, experienced athletes have already maximized many neuromuscular adaptations, such as motor unit recruitment and coordination. So their improvements can come from, fine-tuning and technique efficiency. Muscle hypertrophy plays over time, but seasoned athletes continue to increase muscular power and strength through specialized training. Their anaerobic and aerobic systems are more developed, allowing them to sustain high-intensity efforts with faster recovery. Long-term training also leads to denser, more resilient connective tissues, so your tendons and ligaments, they get stronger with consistent work in, making them more resistant to injury. Additionally, experienced athletes exhibit enhanced precipitation, balance, and reaction time, enabling them to respond to game situations more quickly. Their training becomes more focused on maintaining peak performance, preventing overtraining, and addressing position-specific needs, such as speed for wide receivers or maximal strength for linemen. Unlike beginners, seasoned athletes emphasize injury prevention and recover to sustain the performance over a long career. In other words, these athletes are already more experienced, so they're not just getting started. They know how to take care of their body. They know what specific training they need to do for their specific position. They're already ahead of the game. They are training for, this is life for them as an athlete. It's year round. Some athletes do multiple sports, so it's just important to keep those in mind. In conclusion today, y'all, football is a physically and mentally demanding sport that requires athletes to develop in a diverse range of physiological attributes, including strength, power, speed, agility, and endurance. The specific demands of each position shape the unique training needs of players, with linemen focusing on strength and mass, wide receivers prioritizing speed and agility, and quarterbacks honing in on decision-making and precision. New athletes experience rapid, seasoned players focus on refining their skills while maintaining peak performance and preventing injuries. Limiting factors such as fatigue, muscular imbalances, and reaction time can be an impact on performance, but they can be migrated through targeted training strategies. By understanding these physiological demands and adaptations, coaches, trainers, and athletes can design effective training programs and optimize performance, reduce risk of injury, and support long-term athletic development in the sport of American football, or otherwise known in the States, football. Alrighty, guys, that's going to be it for today. Like I said, this is my extra credit assignment for Dr. Gonzalez's course for exercise physiology at the University of Texas at San Antonio. I hope y'all learned a thing or two, hear me talk, hear me babble for a little bit. But this is something I'm really passionate about. So thank you for listening. We'll see you guys later.